Hey guys, what is up? Long time no see. You know, you knew that with the Superman movie coming out, you knew that I was going to go watch it. You knew I was going to have to drop my thoughts on what I thought of the film. And it has been a while since I posted anything. That's something I'm personally going to be, and I have been trying to work on. And hopefully, maybe you'll be seeing more of me soon. But until then, I still had to get my thoughts out because this was the whole reason I started my YouTube channel again in the first place, was really coming to a head to this film. And now we're here, and I've seen it. And so, what are my thoughts? Well, let's just establish two things really quick. First, this type of movie was made for someone like me. Someone who's grown up, probably like you, who's watched the cartoons, who's read the comic books, who, has literally just loved the character of Superman for such a long time. It's literally the most comic book movie of all comic book movies probably ever created. And so just know that there's probably a bias that I'm going to be, carrying within this film, that I will try to be honest about the things I'm negative about. But this movie literally was made for someone like me. And then secondly, I went into this movie feeling a little bit under the weather, which is like really bad luck. But it did affect some of my enjoyment of the movie, and it is what it is, but it's really hard to get lost into something when you are basically dealing with a personal battle within yourself because you start to realize as you're walking into the movie theater, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. So that's just two things I want to get out of the way. One, that I'm going to admit that I have some biases up front, while also trying not to put my personal inconveniences with my wellness into my review, because I'm assuming most of you probably were not feeling very under the weather when you were seeing this movie. First off, again, this was the kind of movie that I have wanted. This is the kind of universe that I have wanted in the world of DC. And I have always wanted a more fantastical world that, that we are getting to be a part of, instead of the modern age, the modern world that we live in today, getting thrusted with these powerful people and then learning how to deal with it. I like the fact that this is a more lived in world that we're getting to explore. It worked for me. I thought it was fantastic. I want Lex Luthor to be this like wizard-like scientist who does things you just can't really comprehend. I want Superman to have a super dog and to have, helper robots that help him in the Fortress of Solitude. To have these different heroes that could pop up at any moment, or even a kaiju, that can just grow in a day and be something that the superheroes, Superman specifically, has to fight. That kind of world is amazing for me. And I understand that some people are going to prefer more of a science fiction world than a science fantasy world. But for me, give me all the fantasy. That's what I love. I am here for the fantastical. And it just gives me that moment to escape. And not to tread into spoilers, but I do think this is good to know going into the film if you haven't seen it, which is the movie starts off with an opening crawl, somewhat similar to Star Wars, but a little different, where it basically just establishes the universe and gives that information to the audience. And that was absolutely perfect for me and allowed me to dive right into the movie and really understand where the character was and what was going on within the story. But I did hear a complaint from someone outside the theater, and there was something about my wife that I'll mention in a second. But the complaint I heard once we walked out of the theater was for this one particular person. He needs the origin story in the beginning of the movie to really help establish himself into the world. It gives him that time to get lost into the characters, to get lost into the world, and to truly trust and understand the ride he's about to be on. And part of, for him, is that origin story. Now, I think for most audience members, I think some of us are okay not going over, unless you're going to do something new or unique, most of us are okay not going over the story of Krypton over and over and over again. But for someone like him, he needed that. And as far as my wife, I don't know if my wife needed to have the origin story told again, but, you know, she's not a huge comic book nerd like I am. And there was plenty of times in the beginning of the movie where she was kind of lost. And that really faltered her enjoyment at the beginning of the film. And it took her about a solid 30 minutes to really get settled into the movie and to really, you know, understand it and just start enjoying the film. And she's a normie. So when it comes to enjoyment, it kind of makes me wonder, you know, if you're not a huge nerd like I am, are you going to have a hard time understanding what's going on? I would hope not. I would hope that was just a certain situation that my wife just had some confusions on, but her confusions were reasonable. And so that's just something I'll throw out there to show that, you know, I have my bias. I really enjoyed it. It was made for me, all those things. But clearly other people felt differently. And so just kind of carry that when you go see the movie, that there may be some things that, you know, especially if your family aren't huge nerds, you may have to explain a couple things to them. And it might have been a smart idea on my part if I would have sat down with my wife and really explained the different characters before she even saw them. So that way she kind of understood their backstories and kind of understood a little bit more about them and who they were. Now, we have to talk about the perfect casting. Every person in this movie, I believe, has been perfectly casted, and it really comes down to a skill that I feel that James Gunn really has when it comes to casting. He really seems to really know who can make a great character, or what actor can make a great character for that role. And he, again, just excels at this and does an amazing job. There was some things that I had when it came to Mr. Terrific that I had my own person in mind for who I thought Mr. Terrific should be. But Eddie Kathegi, I believe is his name, he did a fantastic job. And clearly James Gunn saw something in him that really made that role fit and work. And he proved it in this movie. And so really, you know, I have who I want the Trinity to be. You know, you have David Cornsweet as Superman. I have the two people in my mind, who I would want to see as Wonder Woman and Batman. But at the end of the day, I trust James Gunn when it comes to casting. And if he picks somebody that isn't who I had in mind, I'm really going to trust him, because I think he's shown that he really knows these characters in a very deep way and really knows how to use them. Going back to talking about Mr. Terrific, like I said, the actor, I was a little iffy on. And I have to admit, he stole the show. This guy was, I mean, his set piece, his action set piece that you'll see in the film, literally gave me goosebumps. But he really was the standout in the whole movie, outside of the people you would expect, like Lois and Clark. They all did a great job, you know, but Mr. Terrific really was a standout and really surprised me, because he was the one I probably doubted the most going in, because I had my own mindset of who I thought Mr. Terrific should be. That he really surprised me, and I was really happy to see how awesome that character really was. It was also great to see Guy Gardner. You know, some of the cool things he has does get a little spoiled into the trailers. It kind of makes me wish I didn't see the trailers originally, but him actually showing off his powers is such a delight to see, and I really can't wait to just see some of the things he does over and over and over again. It was just really, really cool. Now, we can't talk about all these people without mentioning Superman when it comes to great moments, because Superman had some really great moments as well. And it shows how great of a choice David Gordon Sweat was, because he really was a fantastic choice as Superman. And it's one of the reasons I hope this movie does really well, because I want to see more of David Gordon Sweat in the future. I am happy with this world that we're in, and I want to see it flourish and continue. Another standout for me was Jimmy Olsen. To me, he was a scene stealer. And honestly, outside of Lois, was really one of the only Daily Planet characters with enough to do. And to me, that was probably the biggest weakness of the film, is I did not feel like the Daily Planet characters had enough screen time, to be honest, besides Lois and Jimmy. Which really leads to a question, when it comes to this movie being overstuffed. Is it overstuffed? I don't know. I don't think so. There is a lot of characters, and though it flowed for me, there was moments I had to mid-movie explain who certain people were for my wife to understand. I don't think there was too many characters, though. But what I do think was there was too many story knots and not enough time to untie them all, if that makes sense. And which kind of leaves the final act, though enjoyable, I think it could have been a much better to help bring home the final message of the movie. Though I still found it quite touching, I think if you could have just hit some of the story threads that you already knotted into the story, if you're going to make a knot in a story, like a story beat, right? You're going to make a little knot. I have to trust that you're going to untie it for me so it becomes seamless at the end, right? And I didn't really feel like he completely did that. And he definitely does some things that I think if people really ponder and think on to a great ordeal, it's something that they may actually maybe be upset by, possibly. But I just don't know. There was too much going on and not enough time to fix it. But I still think all the characters that were in the movie were needed to be in the movie. I just think maybe he should have maybe picked a lane of where he really wanted this movie to go. And I kind of hate that it didn't go that way. James Gunn is big on making sure that his third acts are incredible. And I can't say this is one of his strongest endings, but I can't say it's one of his weakest either. And, when it comes to the villains, Lex Luthor is incredible. Like I said, all the cast was perfectly casted for this film, but I have to have a little nitpick on Ultraman. Now, I can't really get into why, because that would be more spoiler. I don't want to put any spoilers into this conversation. But I do think that they really missed a really golden opportunity with the Ultraman character that I really wish they would have done something different. But it was still enjoyable. I just think there was a couple things that they could have done that really could have not just been rewarding for the audience, but I think would have helped when it comes to those knots I was talking about. I think it really would have helped with the story beats of the film. And here's the big question. Do I want to see this movie again in the theaters? And my answer is yes, multiple times. And to know someone like me, you need to know that I'm not someone, even if I love a movie, I'm not someone who goes and sees movies multiple times in the theaters unless I really love it, especially now with the economy we're in, for sure. But Lord willing, I will be seeing this film multiple times, and I hope to see it multiple times to have a really true sense of how I feel about the movie before, I even do a spoiler review that I may try to do maybe next week, probably. And so my final real thoughts that I kind of want to end with, and when it comes to this movie, is I think James Gunn made a really solid movie. I think he made a really good movie. But what really happened is he really ended up giving us an amazing world that we're going to get to explore more in the future. Because I can't say that the movie is literally the best movie in the world. And I'm not going to pretend that it is. But I'm also not going to pretend that it's a horrible movie, because it's not. There's definitely issues with different scenes, possibly, that I wasn't affected by too much, but I think there's going to be some people that are going to have critiques about this film that are going to be valid. Honestly, a lot of the critiques that I have, some are nitpicky, but some really deal with spoiler elements, and I don't want to spoil anything about this movie for any of you that haven't got to see it yet. But I really do think he made a good film. But like I said, I think the biggest win out of all this is he's giving us a world to explore. And honestly, there's not a single character in this movie that I don't want to see any more of. Every character, and I really do mean every character, I hope that we see more of them, not just in a Superman movie, but maybe with their own show. Like, give me a Jimmy Olsen TV series, My Pal Jimmy Olsen. I would watch that in a heartbeat. Give me more of this world. And that was one of their biggest goals, and I think they succeeded in that. And so, one last thought that I had before we wrap this up, and it's less about the movie, but it is about that world of DC. And I don't necessarily mean this as a critique of James Gunn. I actually think this is more of a compliment. But there is elements of this, what I'm about to say, that is a critique, and I hope that if someone like James Gunn ever had the opportunity to watch this, I hope it's something he thinks on. I have this weird feeling that every story not directed by or written by James Gunn, but is shepherded by him, is really going to be some of the most amazing experiences ahead of us. And what I mean by that is, someone like George Lucas, how many people were able to tell George Lucas no? Not many people. But being mentored by George Lucas, I'm sure you can make something really great, if that makes sense. So James Gunn is an elite director. He is an amazing director. He's an amazing writer, genuinely an amazing writer. And I do think he's going to give us some amazing things, not just with this film, but he's going to give us amazing things ahead with some of the other things he's done, like with Peacemaker and etc. But, and I know that he gets critiques. I know that he has people who challenges his writing and does things like that. But I think having a lore builder, like a world builder, like someone who, like playing Dungeons and Dragons, like having someone who's like a lore master, just sit down with him, and that's their only job. It's not even about, being a writer or, but just focusing on world building. I think that really knows the world of DC in a really big way. I think would be a really good hire for him. But him being a shepherd of this universe, I think there's going to be like no one better. Kevin Feige really was that guy. It's like, who else could have the job over Marvel, could do such a great job at overseeing Marvel? And for a long time, people have thought Kevin Feige could be the only one who could do it. And there's probably some truth to that, even though Marvel's definitely had their faults and a lot of issues recently, in the past couple of years, basically since after Endgame. But I think James Gunn and Peter Safran are a very unique leadership tag team that I do think we have some great things ahead of us from those studio heads. And I'm really excited to see the future of what the DC universe has to offer. But guys, those are my thoughts. I don't know if I'm going to do any sort of review number or anything like that, but how about you? Let me know down in the comments, what would you give it of a score? And let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear your opinion. But anyway, guys, all love in the world, whatever you're doing, whatever you're going, hope you're having a good one. Peace.